Happy Easter! Welcome to the Easter edition of Unit 3 practice. I've got my bunny ears on. Let that one sink in for just a little while. I'm going to change this pen so you can see it better. So when I put a slide up here again, look at it, pause, try the question, scratch out a little answer, and then go to the next slide and I'll help you through it. Here we go. Okay, in this one, here we go. They described to you the link reaction, right? They said you've got pyruvate converted to acetyl-CoA, and they expect you to know that the pyruvate's outside the mitochondria and the acetyl-CoA that they tell you is used in the Krebs cycle is inside the mitochondria. Therefore, this PDC that helps catalyze that, they want you to be able to say that's in the mitochondria or the matrix. Either one will get you that 1 point, right? So now this guaranteed questions about the change in a system and how that might affect things. If someone has a PDC deficiency, right, that means this is not going to happen, right? They ask you, right, make a claim about how that's going to affect the amount of NADH produced by glycolysis and the amount produced by the Krebs cycle. Well, glycolysis was out here, glucose to pyruvate. This PDC stuff works in here, so you should correctly figure that, well, it shouldn't affect this at all. No change in the amount of NADH produced out here, right? What's your reasoning? Because they ask you to provide reasoning to support your claims, plural, both of them, right? And you notice the scoring rubric. In this case, you don't get a point for the change unless you also get the correct reasoning. So if you say glycolysis occurs before the link reaction, before pyruvate gets, glycolysis continues because PDC is not needed for glycolysis, either one of those will get you that 1 point for the glycolysis claim. Now the Krebs cycle claim, right? If this doesn't happen to make that stuff that they told you is needed for the Krebs cycle, then you'd expect the amount of NADH produced in the Krebs cycle to decrease, because if you don't have acetyl-CoA, then you're not going to have as much Krebs cycle. Okay, so in this one, they ask you to identify, right, and then provide reasoning. This is a very common kind of question. The gene that's most likely to encode for a protein that's an essential component of glycolysis. They expect you to know that glycolysis occurs in virtually, basically, all cells, right? So gene G is the only one that is shown in all cells to be producing at least a moderate amount of RNA. So that's your identification point. And your explanation is simply it's the one expressed in all 6 tissues. And you have to say, that's for the greater, right? Your reasoning, right, is that and glycolysis occurs in all cells, all 6 tissues. If this was different kinds of animals, they could ask you the same question, or even any kind of organism and say glycolysis occurs in all of them. So I expect the gene to encode for a protein essential in glycolysis is going to be expressed by making RNA in all of them. Okay, so next one, scratch out an answer, then skip. Okay, so this was a multiple choice one that simply, like I said to another one, if they just asked you to explain this instead of picking the best explanation, it's a little short part of it one. So here you have activity. That means how fast do you help reactions happen, right? In this case, pH is the independent variable. Practice that again, right? What would they want you to explain here? Well, remember, when it's pH, the increase and decrease is nothing about the number of collisions like it is if this was temperature down here or if this was substrate concentration down here. This is all about active site being the best shape. Where is it the best shape? pH of somewhere around 8. right? So your explanation is also going to describe a little bit and say the optimal enzyme activity is at pH of 8. That's a description, which means at that pH, the active site is in its best shape to fit the substrate. And then go on to say, because they want you to explain the activity levels, not just that one level, explain at these lower pHs, going away from 8 in either direction, the activity drops off quite a bit because the tug and pull of the hydroniums and hydroxides that are what pH are all about, right? Those charged particles are going to tug and pull that protein out of its best conformation, specifically the active site. Okay, ready for the next one? Okay, so this was also multiple choice, and again, if they asked you simply to support that claim that these photosynthetic prokaryotes were responsible for oxygen, here they're simply asking you some basic biology. Do you know that photosynthesis produces oxygen, right? And if you do, say, then that would support my idea that it's these prokaryotes that do photosynthesis that were responsible for producing oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. And if your explanation wants to get a little better, which it always does, right, you can say that this production of oxygen occurs in the light-dependent reactions, specifically when water gets split so that its electrons can fill the electron gap in the chlorophylase of photosystem 2. You really can't say any more than that. Next one. So here they have a graph, okay? This is a little bit of an ecology kind of thing, but it has to do all with photosynthesis and respiration. Those are your two answers down here. They say to identify, right? And then they tell you and underline, right? They identify a pathway and an organism, right? That's responsible for the change in what? Change in oxygen level. So make sure you got the right line you're looking at, right? Between times 1 and times 2, and time 2, and between times 3 and 4. There's a couple of ands here that you need to obviously pay attention to get all your points. So here, notice, right, this is the scoring rubric thing. Between time 1 and 2, what's happening to oxygen, solid line, it's increasing, right? This is the only biology they need you to know here, is that photosynthesis produces oxygen. So what pathway would explain that increase? Photosynthesis, right? And which organism is doing that? The ones they told you were doing photosynthesis, and that's those things, right? So which ones are going to cause this between 2 and 4, the oxygen levels dropping? The ones that do respiration, but all things do respiration. But here also you see the cyanobacteria are dying off, and they told you that they have a short lifespan. They're decomposed by bacteria and fungi, right? And what kind of bacteria and fungi? Ones that use oxygen. So that would explain your decrease in oxygen. Here's the next one.